Hi, thank you very much. Nice to meet you all. Yeah, welcome everyone, and thank you very much for your interest in joining this webinar. Let us briefly introduce ourselves first. So my name is Thomas Irmscher. I'm from ETAS GmbH, located in Munich, Germany, and I'm a product manager for security testing services, focusing on the onboard domain, so for automotive. And I have a couple of years experience in cybersecurity now, 15 in total and 6 especially in the automotive cybersecurity industry. Have been working many worldwide projects, for automotive clients and projects. Yeah, happy to be here and hope to deliver some knowledge to you today. Thank you.
Yeah, hello everyone. That's me, Abdullah. I'm also from ETAS. I'm a penetration tester here at ETAS. I'm also a product red teamer at Bosch. I've been around the security field for a while now. I started with a lot of practical offensive security, as in research, doing CTFs and challenges like that. Then I started creating my own content, my own challenges and CTFs, and yeah, I've been with ETAS since 2018, and that's my expertise in automotive security. Yeah, welcome all. Great to have you.
Thanks, Abdullah. Okay, so now let's go into the content. So here you can see our agenda for this webinar. So we would like to go really from, let's say, the beginning of full vehicle penetration testing, so starting with the regulation side. And then we would like to introduce you and present you our approach for full vehicle testing. Yeah, so how we proceed there, what kind of tools and techniques we are using there, and also what are our experiences in recent projects there. Yeah. Finally, we will have the Q&A session. Hope you have many questions with you, and hopefully we can also answer them. Yeah, looking forward. Okay, so for this webinar, we thought about, okay, what should be the main goals or learning goals or takeaways for you. So first, we would like to give you an informational background, right, into the regulatory situation. So why is full vehicle penetration testing necessary or useful at all? Then we would like to bring closer to you our testing approach, how we go towards a full vehicle penetration system, and in which way do we proceed. Hopefully we can also deliver some real insights for you, so some practical things, and also from our project experience. And finally, we would also like to give you some kind of, at least from our side, a statement. How do we see full vehicle penetration testing? Is it the right measure for vehicle type approval, or is it maybe only one piece of the puzzle? Okay. Having said that, let's start with the first chapter, right? Putting full vehicle penetration testing in light of the regulation. So I'm pretty sure you are all aware of the cybersecurity regulation and homologation legislation behind since a couple of years, actually since last year, and latest by next year, all the road vehicles which are coming up, for example, in Europe or in Japan, Korea, have to have this certification for cybersecurity according to UNR 155 and also according to UNR 156. So, for example, the UNR says the OEM, the car maker, has to do security validation. That's all. Yeah, it does not really say how and in which means and so on. In addition to that, we also have the ISO 21434. It goes a little bit deeper into the, let's say, technical details and also requirements. For example, it says the car maker has to perform validation activities at the vehicle level to achieve the cybersecurity goals. So you can see here first time the vehicle level itself is being mentioned. and that we have to do some validation activities there. But the ISO also does not really say what to do and how. It only gives basically recommendations. And then there's a new standard upcoming. It's the ISO 8477. This is currently being drafted and worked out, and probably next year we will get a first glimpse on that, first draft. It will be somehow a refinement of the 21454 in terms of cybersecurity verification and validation. So this is on the left side, you see, so to say, the global regulation. And on the right side, you can see how is it actually implemented, right? So on the one side, we have quite a clear structure of regulations. However, if we then really look into the practice, the implementation is very diverse. If you look at the UNR 155 related countries, for example, in the EU, it's there up to the national authorities to finally issue this vehicle type approval for every vehicle model. And just as an example, in Germany, there are also those technical service providers involved in order to do the actual cybersecurity homologation. But this is only the situation for Germany. In other countries or on other continents like Japan or Korea, it looks totally different. And so this is also one, let's say, one problem or one challenge in this whole full vehicle penetration context. What is actually the requirement? And this heavily depends on the specific region. What you can see here is our understanding, or let's say the models, how cybersecurity or vehicle type approval is actually being issued and performed. So we see currently at the market 3 models. One is a 3-step model. Here you can see the OEM provides evidence about cybersecurity validation to the TSP, to the technical service provider. Then the technical service provider is the responsible party to do the verification validation of the road vehicle. And once this has been done successfully, the TSP provides the attestation towards the national authority, which in turn gives the certification then to the OEM. For example, this is a situation in most of European countries. There's also a so-called 2-step model available. Here you have the OEM and the national authority and the TSP are one entity, and the OEM provides the evidence directly to the national authority, and which is then also doing the verification validation. And finally, the OEM achieves the attestation and certification. And we also have in certain countries the self-cert model, so the self-certify model. Here the OEM is doing the validation verification by himself, and he then afterwards gives attestation towards the national authority that he has done all the validation verification activities properly, and finally receives the certification from the national authority based on that. So this is more or less the approaches and the procedure, but as mentioned, it is not really fully clear how is this validation verification actually done, what is the right means, and what are the right measures. And what we see is that, and this is also our experience, what we have, that full vehicle penetration testing is one dedicated measure for doing this validation verification. And in this webinar, we would also like to go into the topic, is it really an effective means for cybersecurity validation verification? Okay, understanding now the regulatory background of cybersecurity homologation and vehicle type approval, we would like now to bring you closer to our, let's say, standardized approach, how we are doing full vehicle penetration testing. So we understood full vehicle penetration testing can be a means for cybersecurity vehicle type approval, and we want to see now how we are understanding this. So normally when we do full vehicle penetration testing for our customers as a service provider, we follow a 4-step approach. First, we start with an initial exploration phase. I will also go into a little bit deeper into that on the next slide. Then we have the actual on-site testing. So we will be, of course, close to the OEM and having also there on-site the testing of the actual target, so the vehicle. And this is mostly also the moment where the technical service provider is also available and on-site in order to do the test witnessing, or, for example, to do reviews of test reports and just checking that the validation verification of cybersecurity is going in the right direction. Afterwards, there will be very likely also a remote testing phase, and we prepared this already in the second step. And remote testing gives us basically the chance to do some retests, right? After we have done the on-site testing, we very likely go also into the remote testing, do some plausibility checks of the first findings. Can they be reproduced? Are they really persistent? Or to clarify some findings, for this we have a dedicated remote setup. We will also show you later. And finally, in the last step, we will do the post-analysis together with the car maker, the customer, and potentially also with the technical service provider in order to discuss the findings. Are they acknowledged? Are they really persistent? And then finally also to create the final report. Giving you some more insights into this initial exploration phase. So this phase we learned and we had very good experience with that because there is a huge amount of prerequisites to be done before we can really conduct the penetration test successfully on site. So we asked the customer, please provide us all your schematics for this vehicle type, bus databases, backend configurations in order to test mobile applications, for example. Or if we need, for example, specialized tools, debugger tools, or secure access algorithms, something like this, and also special equipment which is needed during the testing. And further, we are already doing the test preparations. For example, especially in the case of if you're doing an electric vehicle, full vehicle pen test, you certainly have to go also through certain safety trainings. If you're working with high voltage, you need to make sure that you are allowed to do this and got through the necessary safety trainings. What we also have to obey, of course, are any kind of regulations and guidelines like TISAX, so that the confidentiality is assured, that we can make sure that if it's a normal combustion engine, the emissions, we made sure that the regulations are achieved there, and also such, let's say, easy and simple things like getting access finally to the vehicle, right? So having, for example, a garage where we can permanently access it, and also making sure that the key stakeholders or contact persons of the customers are available and that we can easily get spare parts. We made really good practice with doing this initial exploration phase because it's something like a superficial scanning, right? So we go through the whole vehicle, checking that we have everything in place, everything is available, and then we also go into those breakout sessions where we can identify already first pitfalls, potential pitfalls, and discuss it with the customer. Then we have the on-site testing phase. This is normally the actual testing, right? And this takes typically 2 to 4 weeks where we are really on-site with 2 to 3 testers. Normally this takes place at the customer side, so at the OEM, in some garage or in some restricted areas. And during this phase, we are doing really the on-site testing according to our multi-layer testing approach. We will discuss this later, how it works and how it's to be understood. And as already mentioned, this on-site testing activity basically is to achieve 2 goals. To do the tests, of course, and to do them locally, because many tests can only be done locally. If you think of CAN networks or breaking into certain, let's say, closed ports or debug ports, if there are some, or nearby Wi-Fi communications, and also to prepare later on for the third phase, which is the remote testing. On this slide, you can see some pictures. Yeah, please excuse that we cannot show the full pictures, but these are really some pictures we took from the testing. So the right picture shows the testing target, which we need to anonymize here, but you can see that there are certain testing equipments around. For example, here this mobile network testing station, or getting some cables into the vehicle and then really sitting inside the vehicle. For example, on the left, you can see here Abdallah sitting on the back seat, doing some testings directly on the vehicle. And this is then really the practical thing. Okay, then for giving you an introduction of the actual testing methods and how we are doing the testing, I hand over to Abdallah.
Thanks, Thomas. Well, hi, everyone. Yeah, I'll try to give you a brief intro into our test methodologies and our ways of testing. So as an introduction first, second. Yeah, so you've seen this graph 2 slides before. I'll get into it a bit more now. So as Thomas explained, this is more or less a multi-dimensional matrix that more or less summarizes the way we approach our tests. So what this figure is actually showing you is that first we have layers that show you which layers are we attacking or are we testing. At the same time, we have 2 different vertical approaches that we follow when we are testing these layers. So if I would talk first about those layers, we base that on how effective is attacking them or how risky is attacking them, and also on how easily accessible by an attacker they are. So the priority, as you can see, is on how high the impact is of the attacker, how easily accessible is it by an attacker, is it complex to break in, does it need more effort to get to it, or do you just need to be close, for example. And yeah, so for example, the first layer that we start with is being related to wireless interfaces that could cover Bluetooth, Bluetooth low energy, Wi-Fi, you name it, anything that you can attack or target without really having physical access to the car. It could be also keyless entry or NFC and stuff like that. The next layer is, of course, something that you need physical access to the car to perform, and that's attacking or testing the open wired interfaces. So those are interfaces that need physical access. However, they are right in front of you, or they have a built-in interface to communicate with. So for example, USB, OBD port, or you can say Ethernet in some cars, depends on the model you have or on the target you have. And on the third layer, we actually target those interfaces that, in addition to physical access, you also need your own effort to communicate to. So for example, you need to tap in a CAN network or an automotive Ethernet network. So that needs physical access, and in addition to that, it also needs your own effort or your own knowledge to tap into that network, because it doesn't have an open interface to talk to. And yeah, so that's the horizontal layers, but then the vertical layers is divided into 2 aspects, which is the structured and the explorative layers. I'll talk about that. So yeah, so for the vertical focus, the first one, the structured path, you would need a plan. So you would need to already devise a plan. What are the ports, or what are the targets that you're looking for? What are the technologies that you're testing? What do you need for it? And yeah, you define that in a plan. This is an example that you can see in this figure. This is an example plan that we have. We set the priority of every category or component that we test. Yeah, it's so straightforward. You just use your expertise to devise that plan, and then you discuss it, of course, with the customer and see if everything is accepted, and you go based on that. However, you of course don't stop there, because you cannot just use whatever you planned or whatever is pre-agreed on. There has to be an explorative focus or explorative attack path. So there might be some other attack vectors that you didn't plan, or that you only find out while you're doing the testing. And that's why we also cover the explorative structure. A simple example for that is when you do fuzzing or we do scanning. And then you find out there are some other attack vectors that are, for example, undocumented or that were not disabled. And then you have to also tackle those vectors. You don't just ignore them because they weren't on the plan. So this is also something that you should keep in mind. Yeah, with that being said, I will give you some examples of how we work on those methodologies. So as you can see, there's this this map that you can see, and I don't know if you can see my pointer or something just to show you. I mean, I don't really need to, but I just wanted to show you. So as you can see here, this is the metrics that we saw before, and I'm just going to map it to every testing technique that I'm showing you here. Keep in mind that's not everything, of course. There's also always new things, but yeah, that's something that I would recommend you keep in mind. So this is an example of a testing technique. We're talking about scanning here, and this also, if you have a background in security, this can also be known from classical InfoSec or computer security. So when you connect to your Wi-Fi or your Ethernet or automotive Ethernet, you want to know what's around you. So you do scanning, you scan all those network interfaces, network hosts, and try to find open services, hosts that are connected to the same network, and you identify services running on those hosts or on those ports. And of course, if you're familiar with pen testing, after you do that, you look for vulnerabilities that are possibly there on those running services. Is there something that's not up to date? Is there something that has been exploited recently? And yeah, in automotive, it's well possible that you find that. It's not the same as servers that are always connected to the internet. So there is possibility that you find things that got an exploit recently, and yeah, of course, you have to actively try to exploit that to prove that this is a risk that needs to be mitigated by the vehicle owner, by the company that creates the car. The goal, as I said, is to identify the services and find those vulnerabilities and, well, try to exploit them and tell the customer that, well, this is how easy is it to exploit? Is it possible? Is it not even feasible? So you have to really rate it, not just find it and then report it. Yeah, I gave you some examples here. It's possible that you scan a target. Of course, you can see that the IP doesn't exist. That's not a real IP, but this is from a real example or from a real pen test. You can scan a target and find some ports open. Of course, in this case, it was UDP, which is usually overlooked, but you shouldn't do that. Yeah, other examples is that you might find a web server with an API service that's exposed that leaks information. You could find a web server that has a DOS known vulnerability, and so on. Yeah, I'll give you some example tools that you can probably work with, or you probably know. If you do network scanning, you can use Nmap, Metasploit, AutoRecon, which is actually a collection of tools. If you're testing Wi-Fi, you can use AirCrack or Reaver for WPS testing. If you find web servers, you can use Burpsuit or Nuclei. And of course, I will say this many times, you need to have your own custom internal tools that you can use for your own scenarios. This is another test. So I only mentioned finding services that are vulnerable, but that's not always the case. Sometimes the service is not vulnerable, but it has a misconfiguration that you have to find. And this is also another part of pen testing. So an example is that you scan Wi-Fi access point and find misconfigurations. You find it using wrong or a broken encryption scheme. Yeah, you also can find a target that has possible ARP table exhaustion, and this is something that I can show you. So this is from a real-life pen test, and yeah, so for example, this is an example where you actually exhaust the ARP table, and then no legitimate user can connect to the car Wi-Fi. And yeah, this depends on how long it stays or how long the table stays exhausted. And if it stays for long, then this is not usable anymore. And this is something that you can find. This is an example of findings you can find. And yeah, again, when it comes to the tools, there are similar tools that I mentioned because you're doing more or less the same thing. But yeah, you also need your own tools. And yeah, this is one example of a tool that we created ourselves. Yeah, you can do DNS tunneling with Iodine if you want. This is also another network attack that you can use to check if there are misconfigurations. Yeah. Yep. This is another testing technique, which is assessing the network security. I've mapped this to a closed wired interface on a structured plan because, for example, this is something that we did. Of course, you can do that over wireless and probably open wired too, but this is the example I mentioned here, and this is the example I'm showing in this figure. But yeah, I'll get into that. So for the yeah, so what you do here is that you check for the security of lower layers protocols like ARP, DHCP, and stuff like that. And since this is a closed wired interface, there's less checks for integrity. It's not connected to a PKI or to an infrastructure that does verification for public key. And in that case, spoofing, sniffing, poisoning is usually possible. This is a very important thing. So I would really look for stuff like that when you're doing a full vehicle pen test on a closed wired interface. So for example, in this particular example, we're connected to an automotive Ethernet interface. And yeah, I'm sorry for all the redacting, but that's necessary. However, if you look at it, you can see that we found a web server there. And actually, this was in a heavily firewalled environment. However, because there's, as I said, less integrity checks, then it was always possible to spoof our own source IP, and that allowed us to talk to a web server that we aren't allowed to talk to. And yeah, we were able to leak some personal data, which you can't see here, but trust me, it's there. Yeah, so yeah, to go over it again, your goal is to assess the security of this network stack, and you have to understand what's the risk level that an attacker can impose when they find or exploit such weaknesses. The reason I say that is that it might be a small risk because it's too difficult to get to, but it might be also a high risk because the information the attacker would find are really sensitive. Yeah, some examples are, as you probably got from this figure, if you're familiar with pen testing, is spoofing attacks against layer 2 protocols like ARP, DHCP, poisoning. And a lot of cars nowadays use IPv6. So whatever protocols map to ARP and DHCP on IPv6, you can also poison and spoof. And yeah, as I said, this was more or less a man-in-the-middle attack where we're able to sniff the traffic between two ECUs and then pretend to be one of them. So we combined sniffing and spoofing in one attack. There are many tools that you can use for that. You can use ARP spoof if it's an IPv4. You can use BetterCap also for sniffing and DNS spoof. So those are like famous tools that you can also use in a normal IT infrastructure, but it's also usable on an automotive scenario. If you're familiar with testing, this picture obviously is taken from Wireshark. So this is also always a great tool to have. And again, you need your own tools. That's very important. Yeah, I guess this is another example. I feel like I didn't cover the explorative testing. So this is one example. So fuzzing is always a good thing to look at. So for example, in this case, I show an example of Wi-Fi fuzzing. So this is where we fuzzed the Wi-Fi of an automotive, and we showed that it's possible to DLS the communication. I don't know if you can see down here, but the pinging got really high because of our fuzzing. So this is one example of what you can do. You might find better vulnerabilities, but in that case, that was found. When it comes to fuzzing, I would like to differentiate between two different approaches for fuzzing. It can be a separate setup or a system level fuzzing where all you do to the car is fuzz it and fuzz the ECUs in it, or fuzz whatever interfaces you got. Or it could be a part of the pen test where you fuzz to find vulnerabilities as an explorative approach, as I told you. And they both differ in scale and goal. One, you just need to fuzz to find if the car is reliable, and that has its own regulations. And one is you're fuzzing during the pen test engagement. And that's, yeah, I mean, the technique might be the same, but your goal is different and the scale of the fuzzing is different. And your goal here is to find non-documented attack vectors that lead to non-documented findings. And yeah, you also can test if the system is robust enough. Is it going to fall for the DOS, as I mentioned in this example? In this example, we were fuzzing Wi-Fi communication, and we were able to slow down the network. Yeah, a well-known Wi-Fi fuzzer is WPA-X-Fuzz. And yeah, I'll talk about fuzzing engines here. So fuzzing engines is an engine that creates your fuzzing test cases. It doesn't actually communicate with the target, but it's always good to have a really good fuzzing engine behind your fuzzing process. And Redamsa is one of the open source ones that you can use. And yeah, of course, you have to have your own personal custom tools. This is another fuzzing example, which is unique for the car or for automotive, which is CAN interface fuzzing. And this can be done on OpenWired, as you can see here. And that's, wait, where's the laser? Yeah. So if you do it in OpenWired, then you're connected, for example, to the OBD interface. Or if you do it on closed wire, then you're doing it by tapping into the CAN network yourself. And yeah, those are different fields where you can use CAN fuzzing as an explorative test. Yeah, so the goal here is similar to what I said before. In the Wi-Fi fuzzing, you try to find undocumented attack vectors or test the robustness of the car and test the reliability and the security of the CAN bus. Of course, CAN bus was not built for security, it was built for reliability, but in a pen test, you have to test both. There are different solutions that add security on top of the CAN bus, so you will need to test those. Yeah. The examples that you can do, as I said, you fuzz the CAN bus, you fuzz UDS servers that are on top of the CAN buses, which is a very common thing. Yeah, and yeah, you might discover memory leaks. That's actually more interesting than simple DOSs, and that's also possible. I'll mention some example tools here. As you can see, we always have our own internal tools, and recently we released our own fuzzer, which is called eScript CycleFuzz. And this is one of our products that we use. It used to be an internal tool, now it's a product approach. Yeah, so this was the testing methodology and testing technique examples that I've talked about. I'll talk a little bit about the some of the prerequisites and challenges that we have in our full vehicle pen testing. So yeah, this would be a bit of a theoretical slide, a little bit, after all the practical we talked about. So yeah, what are some of the challenges that we are faced with? When you do a full vehicle pen test, please keep in mind that it's not really one department that you're talking to or one person that's responsible for the whole thing. It's a whole organization. Of course, it's an OEM, so it's a really huge organization. There are different people to talk to, different responsible people, different stakeholders, like with a really huge structure. So being able to get to the right person every time is not a walk in the park. You really need to work for it. Yeah, one of the problems, as mentioned in the slide, is insufficient information. So we always, or most of the time, we agree on having a gray boxed arrangement or engagement. So they're like, okay, we'll give you sufficient information to perform your attacks. However, it turns out always to become a black box test because we don't get all the information. Yeah, so we agree on a gray, but turns out to be black. I don't remember doing a white box automotive test or full vehicle pen test. I think that would be good, but I haven't seen it. Yeah, the information could come late after we already discovered it, or it can never come. And yeah, as I said, the car has tons of ECUs, and each ECU is from a different department, from a different supplier. So yeah, it's challenging to do that. So please keep that in mind. And yeah, when it comes to the logistical environment, that's also something to take care of. Is the car available? When is the car available? Is it available through the window that was agreed on? Do we have a test facility to come to and test the car? As Thomas mentioned already, if you're dealing with an electric car, then you need to do some high voltage training and get the certificate before you can work on the car, which makes sense. And yeah, keep in mind that ECUs break when you fuzz them or when you test them. So it might be good to have a risk plan in mind. And if there's anything that might break, maybe keep that test to the end, because if it breaks, it might not get a replacement. Sometimes you get that, sometimes you don't. So keep that in mind too. And yeah, so remember when I mentioned the closed interfaces that you need to tap into the car or something? Sometimes we get help from the OEM where they provide interfaces that we can use to tap into those interfaces, but that's not always the case, and it's not always available. So this is another challenge. When it comes to the remote setup that also Thomas talked about, I'll show you an example about it and what tests you can do remotely. So yeah, this is a nice graph that more or less summarizes how our remote test setup is. So as you can see, we have to get to the garage or test facility and set up our remote test setup. So you connect the car to, or the ECUs in the vehicle to a garage laptop, we call it, or something that's connected to the car, and to a VPN through an LTE router, and that's connected to our VPN server on our location. And then from there, a penetration tester can connect to that setup either from our ETAS location or from other testing locations, and will be able to access this laptop in the garage, which is connected to all the proper interfaces that we already connected it to. So more or less, this is the idea of the remote setup. And yeah, so what I want to tell you is that what you can do with that setup. So once you connect it to the proper networks, you can either scan, you can do poisoning, injecting, anything. Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was sorry. Yeah, so you can do anything that was allowed to you when you were physical there, or when you had physical. What was I going to say? Yeah, when you were there in the car facility. And connect to the right interfaces. So for example, if you're connected to the Wi-Fi, then you do the Wi-Fi tests. If you're connected to the CAN interface, then you can do the CAN interface tests. But of course, there are limitations because it's remote. So if you want to modify the test setup, or you want to connect to a new CAN interface, for example, or a new Wi-Fi or USB, you cannot do that easily because you're not there. So you have to make sure you connect it to everything before you leave the test facility. Also, power cycling is limited. So if something breaks and you need to turn off the car and turn it on again, that's not always easy. And of course, if there's any test that causes a visual result, like, I don't know, the car beeps or the lights turn on, that's not always easy. It's not always easy to put a cam there, and that's usually breaks some privacy rules. So you cannot do that. So those are some limitations, but other than that, you can do any test that you want. I'll hand it back to Thomas now to conclude. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much, Abdallah, for giving us the great technical insights. So we are coming now to the end of our webinar, of our session, and we would like now to conclude with you to the initial question, right? Is full vehicle penetration testing really a good means and an effective means for vehicle type approval? We see it like this. So on this page, you can see the pros and cons of full vehicle testing in light of the cybersecurity vehicle type approval. On the left side, on the pro side, you can see, yes, full vehicle level penetration testing makes sense and is a good means, because you can really something like a last stop, like a last chance security check for the car maker to reduce at least the risk of cross negligence. Yeah, so that you have maybe some orphaned interfaces still activated, like Wi-Fi, or so you can catch those things. A next good advantage of this type of testing is you can consolidate many attacks on the full vehicle level and thereby also save time. So if you think of multiple ECU fuzzing, Abdallah mentioned this, and for example, what you can do with our tool sCrypt CycleFuzz, you can fuzz many ECUs at the same time, and this of course reduces your overall amount of efforts and time. Finally, this is also from an organizational and legislation and process point of view, a good mean for doing this test witnessing, or to do this attestation of verification validation. Because when you do those tests for the car maker, you can also be accompanied by the technical service provider who looks over your shoulder, right, and checks what the testers are doing, what are the results, what were the specific test steps, and so on. This could be a really good chance that the technical service provider in the end makes a result and gives an attestation, okay, the cybersecurity has been assessed properly. On the con side, we see that the test coverage is, from our perspective, insufficient. So you cannot just say, I'm only doing full vehicle penetration testing, that's all and fine. Of course, you also have to do this on the component level. Yeah, so by doing a full vehicle penetration test, you cannot just say the full car is secure. Yeah, because in the end you have to test each component individually beforehand. The second disadvantage what we see is also the depth of testing. So as you found out during Abdallah's presentation, we are only testing on a quite superficial level, right? We're always seeing only the specific vehicle, but we cannot really look on the component level. For example, if there are some breakable hardware interfaces where we can go inside and read out the memory or so on, this is very hard to achieve with this kind of testing. And third and last point is that, yeah, as you have seen at the beginning of this presentation, the situation of vehicle type approval is very heterogeneous worldwide. Even though full vehicle penetration testing is considered in one region as a effective mean for vehicle type approval, it does not necessarily need to be in all the other UNR 155 countries. So the level of comparability is quite low. Yeah. Having said that, we are coming now to the end. Thank you very much for your participation and interest, and we are now open for your questions if you have. Thank you.